Okay, picture this. Someone's in trouble, right? Maybe it's a clear emergency, maybe something less
Like
obvious.
someone being harassed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your first thought might be to step in, but then you look around and there are other people.
Hmm.
It feels like more people should mean more help, but surprisingly often, it doesn't.
Yeah, it's that reluctance to help when others are present. We call it the bystander effect.
And it feels so backwards, doesn't it? You'd think safety in numbers would, extend to helping.
Absolutely. So in this deep dive, we're really trying to understand why this happens.
Right.
We'll be pulling apart the research from social psychology, getting to the core of it. And crucially, we want this to be useful for you listening.
Yeah, the goal isn't about blame, is it? It's about understanding those powerful situational forces.
Exactly. Not judging, just grasping the dynamics.
We know you're looking for those quick but thorough insights, those aha moments without getting totally lost in the academic weeds. So let's start with a case that, well, even though the details got debated later, it really kicked off the formal study of this.
You're talking about Kitty Genovese, 1964, Queens, New York.
That's the one.
Yes. And the initial story was incredibly powerful. Alarming, frankly.
The narrative was 38 witnesses saw or heard parts of this long attack and did nothing.
That was the line, yeah. No intervention, no quick call to the police. It sparked this huge societal concern, like, what's wrong with us?
It really did. And it was that public shock, right, that led social psychologists Bibb, Latané and Darley to really dig deep.
They started asking, is this just people being callous? Or is there something else going on in these group situations?
And their work shifted the focus away from just blaming individuals.
Towards the influence of the social environment itself, which was revolutionary at the time.
No, we should add some context here because later on.
Right. Later investigations show the initial reporting wasn't entirely accurate. The number of direct eyewitnesses was probably smaller.
And some calls were made.
Some calls were made, yes. And a neighbor did eventually go to her, tried to help.
So even the New York Times, which ran the original story, later acknowledged issues with that account.
They did. But, even with those corrections, the idea of it, the narrative of widespread inaction,
It stuck.
it really resonated. It forced this conversation about our responsibilities. And critically, it spurred Latané and Darley's research. Very important research.
And that research, unlike the specifics of the story, has really held up, hasn't it?
It really has. While the Genovese story is more complex, the psychological principles Latané and Darley found in their experiments, they're robust, still relevant today.
They fundamentally changed how we think about why we might hesitate to, get involved.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack that psychology. Why don't we act sometimes? What were those main pressures Latané and Darley identified?
Well, one of the biggest ones was what they call diffusion of responsibility.
Diffusion of responsibility. Okay.
The core idea is just that when you're in a group, you feel less personally responsible for taking action.
Because the responsibility feels spread out.
Exactly. Spread out among everyone there. It's that classic feeling of, oh, someone else will do it.
Ah, yeah. I can see that. It makes kind of unsettling sense. Surely one of these other people will step up.
Right. The mental weight of it feels lighter the more people are around.
So the key takeaway is more people, less personal responsibility felt, even if you mean well.
Precisely. And they showed this so clearly in their 1968 experiment, the one with the staged seizure.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about that.
Okay, so participants thought they were hearing someone have an epileptic seizure over an intercom. When they believed they were the only person listening,
They helped.
85% of them went to get help, a huge majority. But when they thought others were also listening in,
The number dropped.
plummeted, down to just 31%.
Wow. That's a massive difference.
It really is. Just knowing others were aware dramatically reduced that feeling of, I have to be the one to act.
So that feeling of sole responsibility is a powerful motivator. Okay, what's the next key pressure?
The next big one is pluralistic ignorance.
Pluralistic ignorance. Okay, sounds complex.
It's really about social influence in ambiguous situations. When you're not sure if something is an emergency, what do?
You look around, see what others are doing.
Exactly. You look at everyone else, and if they all seem calm, unconcerned.
You figure, okay, maybe it's not a big deal then.
Precisely. Even if your gut is kind of screaming that something's wrong,
Yeah.
you interpret the situation based on their apparent calm. It's the, well, no one else seems concerned effect.
Ah, I get that. It's like nobody wants to be the one who freaks out over nothing, the fear of looking silly.
Totally. So the key insight is, in unclear situations, We rely heavily on others' reactions, even if their inaction is just because they're also uncertain and looking at us.
It's a feedback loop of doing nothing.
Exactly. And their smoke-filled room experiment showed this perfectly.
Smoke-filled room.
Yeah, they had participants fill out questionnaires. Smoke starts pouring into the room. If the participant was alone,
They reported it.
overwhelmingly yes, and quickly. But if they were in the room with two actors who were told to just ignore the smoke, act passively,
They're less likely to report it.
much less likely.
Yeah.
They'd often glance at the calm actors, maybe look confused, but then just go back to their questionnaire. They concluded it wasn't an emergency because the others weren't reacting.
So the lack of reaction becomes the signal that no reaction is needed. Wow.
It's a powerful social conformity effect. Everyone's looking, nobody's acting, so everyone concludes action isn't required. That fear of embarrassment and misjudging it really reinforces it.
Which highlights how important that first mover is, right? The person who breaks the spell.
Absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
Someone who signals, no, this is serious, or just acts, that can snap everyone else out of it.
Okay, so we've got someone else will do it, diffusion of responsibility, and no one else is worried, so maybe I shouldn't be. Pluralistic ignorance.
Yeah.
What's the third key pressure?
The third one they identified is evaluation apprehension.
Evaluation apprehension, like fear of being judged.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also called audience inhibition. It boils down to the fear of being judged negatively by the other bystanders for how you intervene, or even for intervening at all. The thought is kind of like, what if I mess this up? What if I look foolish?
Right, that fear of making a mistake, looking incompetent, getting criticized by the crowd, especially if you're not 100% sure what to do.
Yeah. So the key insight is that worry about social judgment can be a really powerful brake on action.
Makes sense. You hesitate because you're worried about getting it wrong, looking silly, facing disapproval.
Absolutely. And research suggests this fear often gets stronger as the crowd gets bigger. More eyes on you.
Although maybe feeling anonymous in a very large crowd could reduce that a bit.
Potentially, yes. Anonymity can sometimes lower that barrier. But generally, more known observers equals more potential judgment.
Okay, so this trio: diffusion of responsibility, pluralistic ignorance, evaluation apprehension. It really paints a picture of, well, a matrix of indecision, why good intentions might stall.
It really does. And these three often interact, reinforcing each other.
Yeah, you can see how they'd work together. You hesitate because you're not sure it's an emergency. Pluralistic ignorance. You figure someone else will act anyway. Diffusion. And you definitely don't want to jump in and look stupid if you're wrong. Evaluation apprehension.
Precisely. It's a powerful combination holding people back.
So to understand this better, Latané and Darley came up with a model, right? Like steps in the decision process.
Yes, a 5-step model of bystander intervention. It breaks down the decision to help into a sequence. And the key is, failure at any one of these steps means no help is given.
Okay, walk us through these 5 steps. Where does it start?
Step 1 is super basic. Notice the event.
You have to actually see it happening.
Exactly. You can't help if you don't even realize something's up. In busy places, we're often distracted, preoccupied. So simply failing to observe. That's the first hurdle. Surprisingly common.
True. Head down, looking at your phone, lost in thought. You could miss something right next to you.
Totally. So, okay, you've noticed something. Step 2 is interpret the event as an emergency.
Ah, so deciding, okay, this is serious, this needs help.
Right. And this is where that ambiguity factor and pluralistic ignorance really kick in hard. If it's unclear, is that person just drunk? Or are they having a medical issue? Are those people arguing, or is it getting dangerous? You hesitate.
And you look to others who are also looking.
And if everyone seems unsure or passive, you might conclude, probably not an emergency, and you stop there.
Got it. Okay, step 3.
Step 3, assume responsibility. So you've noticed it, you've decided it is an emergency. Now you have to decide it's your job to do something.
And this is where diffusion of responsibility bites again.
Big time. The presence of others makes you think someone else will handle it, or maybe someone else is better qualified. Your own feeling of competence, your relationship to the victim, that all plays in here too.
Right. I don't know first aid, or that person looks like they know them. Excuses, basically.
Well, sometimes legitimate concerns, but they function to pass the responsibility.
Yeah.
Okay, step 4. No appropriate form of assistance. Decide what to do.
So figuring out how to help.
Yes. Direct help. Call 911. What's the best course of action? If you don't know what to do, or you're afraid of making things worse.
You might freeze up.
Exactly. Lack of knowledge or skills is a barrier here. You might see someone collapse, but worry about moving them wrong.
Makes total sense. And the final step, step 5.
Step 5. Implement the decision. Actually do it. Take action.
Even after all that, you might still not act.
Yes. This is where evaluation apprehension can come back in. Fear of looking foolish performing the action, or assessing the actual costs and risks, physical danger, legal trouble, time commitment, emotional distress. If those seem too high,
You might still hold back.
you might. So it's this whole chain. Notice, interpret, assume responsibility, know how to help, act. A breakdown anywhere along that chain.
Means inaction. Wow, it really shows how helping isn't just one decision, but a whole sequence of them. Makes it seem almost fragile.
It can be, especially when things are ambiguous or others are around. Understanding these steps is key if we want to figure out how to encourage intervention.
Okay, so we have the core psychology, the decision steps. But surely the specific situation matters hugely too. Like, what's actually happening?
Oh, absolutely. Context is critical. The likelihood of someone helping isn't just about those internal processes. The situation itself is massively influential.
Like how clear the emergency is.
Exactly. Ambiguity is a huge factor. Clear-cut emergencies, someone yelling for help, visible injury, they get more help faster. Ambiguous ones, that's where pluralistic ignorance thrives.
Makes sense, cuts through the confusion.
Then there's the number of bystanders. We talked about the classic view. More bystanders, less individual helping because of diffusion.
Right.
But as we'll get to, it's a bit more nuanced in real life than perceived danger or cost.
Like, is it risky for me to get involved?
Yeah. Higher perceived risk generally decreases helping. Although, if the danger to the victim is really high and clear, that can sometimes boost intervention. People weigh risks and rewards.
So maybe more willing to help someone who dropped groceries than break up a knife fight. Generally.
Generally, yes. Though clear distress signals from the victim yelling, obvious fear can increase help even in risky situations. And interestingly, some meta-analyses found the bystander effect is actually weaker if a perpetrator is present.
Really? Why?
Possibly because it reduces ambiguity. It's clearly an attack, not just something weird happening. The need for action is more obvious.
Okay. What else about this situation?
The environment itself. People tend to be more helpful in familiar, comfortable settings. Big, anonymous urban spaces might increase that feeling of, it's not my problem, less accountability.
Right. So a lot of situational factors. What about the people involved? Does who you are or who the victim is make a difference?
Oh, definitely. Individual characteristics matter a lot. For the potential helper, empathy is a big one.
If you can feel what they're feeling?
Yes, both understanding their perspective and sharing their emotion. Higher empathy usually means more helping. Your mood matters too. People in a positive mood tend to help more. And your sense of competence. Do you feel like you can help effectively? That's called bystander self-efficacy. Believing you can make a difference makes you more likely to try.
Confidence in your ability.
Exactly.
Right.
Also, your moral values, past experiences with helping. If you helped before and it went well, you're more likely to again. Even some personality traits, like tending towards sympathy versus personal distress, can play a role.
Okay, that makes sense for the helper. What about the victim? Do their characteristics change things?
Yes, significantly. First, your relationship to them. You're far more likely to help someone you know, friend, family, than a stranger.
Obvious, but important.
Also, unfortunately, things like perceived attractiveness or likability can influence helping. And perceived similarity, if you see the victim as being like you in some way, that boosts empathy and helping. And sadly, biases can creep in. Judgments about whether someone is deserving of help can unfairly impact whether they get it.
So it's this really complex mix. The situation, who's there, who you are, who the victim is, all swirling together.
Exactly. It's rarely simple. Helping often emerges from a specific combination, a clear need, someone you relate to, feeling capable in a situation that feels manageable.
It's fascinating and, yeah, a bit unsettling, too, seeing all those layers. Now, this research really took off mid-century. How does it play out today in the 21st century?
Incredibly relevant. Those core principles haven't gone away. We see them on the street and increasingly online, too.
So, unfortunately, we still see real-world tragedies where bystander inaction is a factor.
We do. Beyond Genovese, think about the 2009 Richmond high school gang rape. Reports said many students were present, some even filming on phones. Peer pressure, fear of snitching seemed to paralyze people.
That's horrific.
Or Raymond Zach in 2011 stood in the water off a beach for almost an hour. Firefighters, police, onlookers. Reports suggest everyone assumed someone else would act. Even trained professionals got caught in that diffusion of responsibility.
Wow, among first responders.
It highlights how powerful it can be. And Esmond Green in 2008 dying on a hospital ER floor after collapsing. Staff and security apparently observed her but didn't provide timely aid. Shows institutional bystander effects, too.
Those are deeply disturbing examples. It's hard to fathom the inaction.
It is. And sadly, there are other cases, James Bulger, Ilan Halimi, Hugo Taliax, Wang Yu, even aspects of the George Floyd case where the presence and actions or inactions of bystanders were significant factors.
A stark reminder, this isn't just theory, it has awful consequences.
Yeah.
And you mentioned online. How does this work digitally?
The same core principles apply online, absolutely. Think about cyberbullying, online harassment, spreading misinformation. People are often less likely to intervene online if they see a large audience is also watching.
Yeah, the internet feels huge. Easy to think my comment won't matter or someone else will report this.
Exactly. Anonymity or perceived anonymity lowers personal responsibility. De-individuation. The sheer scale amplifies diffusion. With thousands seeing this, someone else will act.
Plus, maybe just information overload, seeing so much negativity.
That too. Desensitization. It's hard to process and respond to everything. And then there's that performative aspect. People sometimes prioritize recording or sharing over actually helping.
Right, we see that a lot. Documenting instead of intervening.
But online isn't totally hopeless. Research also shows people might feel more responsibility if the situation seems really severe or if there's a direct plea for help aimed at them.
Okay.
And in cyberbullying, bystanders play different roles, ignoring, defending, reinforcing the bully. Things like empathy, moral disengagement, anonymity influence which role someone takes. Interestingly, some studies suggest intervention intentions might go up initially with more online bystanders, but then drop off for direct actions.
So it's complex. More online eyes doesn't automatically equal more help.
Not necessarily. The platform architecture itself might even encourage the bystander effect sometimes. We need to understand these digital dynamics better to foster intervention online.
This is incredibly insightful, but I know there's been some pushback or refinement of the classic bystander effect idea too, right? Is it always true that more bystanders, less help?
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
While the classic effect is solid, its universality has been questioned, especially as research moved beyond those early low-stakes lab studies.
Like someone dropping papers versus something actually dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. What about real danger? A big meta-analysis in 2011 by Fisher and colleagues looked at tons of studies. They found the bystander effect is much weaker or even disappears in situations seen as highly dangerous,
Oh, interesting.
especially when a perpetrator is present or when intervening involves physical risk. In high-danger scenarios, people were often just as likely to help alone or with one other person.
So when it's clearly serious, that diffusion of responsibility maybe doesn't kick in as much.
That's the idea. The arousal cost-reward model suggests dangerous situations are clearer, they provoke a stronger gut reaction, more motivation to act. Plus, maybe in danger, other bystanders seem less like diffusers of responsibility and more like potential allies.
Strength in numbers could actually encourage action then.
Potentially.
Yeah.
So danger is complex. It might trigger the classic effect in low-risk situations, but different dynamics in high-risk ones.
That's a critical nuance. What about real-world evidence, like from CCTV? Does that show something different?
Yes, interestingly, recent studies analyzing actual CCTV footage of public fights and conflicts find that bystander intervention is surprisingly common. Like in the vast majority of incidents, at least one person steps in.
Really? That seems counter to the lab findings.
It does, and one study even suggested that in real-world violence, the chance of the victim getting help actually increased with more bystanders.
Whoa, that's almost the opposite. How do they explain that?
Well, ideas like helping saturation. Maybe once a few people start helping, others feel less need to jump in. Or self-policing people stepping in to manage aggression within their own social groups.
It really shows the gap between controlled labs and messy reality.
Absolutely. And another huge factor, maybe downplayed early on, is social relationships.
Knowing the people involved.
Exactly. People are way more likely to help friends, family, members of their own group compared to strangers. Those social ties can often override the number of bystanders.
So if you see your friend getting hassled in a crowd, you're probably going in regardless of how many others are there.
Much more likely, yes. It reminds us crowds aren't just anonymous units. Connections matter. And finally, the early focus was very cognitive decision steps. Maybe it overlooked emotions, brain processes, personality more than it should have.
So the research is always evolving, getting more nuanced.
Exactly. The classic effect is real, foundational. But we're learning more about when it applies strongly and when other factors, danger, relationships, real-world dynamics change the equation.
Okay, so we've gone really deep into why we hesitate. But the crucial question is, how do we change it? How do we move from being passive bystanders to active, what's the term? Upstanders.
Upstanders, exactly. How do we foster that culture of intervention?
Yeah. What works?
Well, the good news is research gives us clear strategies. Education is fundamental.
Just knowing about the bystander effect helps.
It really can.
Yeah.
Making people aware of diffusion of responsibility, pluralistic ignorance, it helps you recognize those forces when they're happening, in yourself or others.
So you can consciously push back against them?
Right. It encourages trusting your gut, taking things seriously even if others seem passive. Training can also build confidence, make people feel more capable of helping.
Okay, what about practical things, like in the moment?
There are useful frameworks. One is the D's of bystander intervention.
Yeah.
Gives you concrete options.
The D's. Like what?
Okay, so direct speak up, confront the behavior safely, check in with the target, distract, create a diversion, interrupt the situation indirectly,
Right.
delegate, get help from others, authorities, someone better equipped,
Okay, direct, distract, delegate. Any others?
document record details, time, place, if it's safe, can be useful later, and delay check-in with the person afterwards, offer support once the immediate situation is over.
Direct, distract, delegate, document, delay. That's helpful, like a toolkit.
Exactly. It's about having options, choosing what feels safe and right for you in that situation. Not everyone has to do the same thing.
Right. And are there formal programs that teach this stuff?
Yes, programs like Bringing in the Bystander and others. Research shows they can be effective. They can reduce acceptance of harmful myths, help people identify risky situations better, increase feelings of personal responsibility, boost confidence, that self-efficacy we talked about, and strengthen intentions to act.
So they actually make a difference.
They seem to, yes. Though more research is needed on long-term behavior change. But they're a valuable tool, especially when tailored well.
And how do we specifically fight back against those psychological barriers, like diffusion of responsibility?
Countering diffusion. Cultivate personal responsibility. Act like you're the only one there. Or if others are there, single someone out. You in the red jacket, call 911. Make it specific.
Takes away the ambiguity of who should act. What about pluralistic ignorance?
Trust your gut. Assume it is an emergency until proven otherwise. It's better to feel awkward for a moment if you're wrong than to regret not acting if you were right. Be the first mover. Your action can break the spell for others.
Good advice. And evaluation apprehension. Fear of looking silly.
Practice helps. Role-playing interventions can build confidence, and try to focus on the positive impact of helping, not the potential negative judgment. Think about the person needing help, not just the audience.
It sounds like being an upstander isn't about being some kind of hero, necessarily.
Not at all.
It's more about awareness, having some skills, and finding the willingness to act on your better instincts.
Precisely. It's often a learned skill, giving people the tools and the understanding to overcome those natural hesitations.
This has been a really, really eye-opening deep dive. It's so clear that bystander inaction isn't just apathy. It's these powerful psychological forces.
Yeah, and understanding them is the first step to countering them.
Absolutely. And the implications are huge: communities, workplaces, online, everywhere.
But the hopeful message is, this isn't inevitable. The bystander effect isn't insurmountable.
Right. That shift from bystander to upstander, it's a conscious choice.
Yeah.
And it's one we can get better at with education and practice.
Exactly. And maybe a final thought for you to chew on. Think about the ripple effect. One single act of intervention. It doesn't just help that one person.
It breaks the pattern.
Breaks the pattern, yes. It models action for others. It can start to shift the whole social dynamic towards intervention, towards responsibility.
So reflecting on our own power, individually and collectively, to build safer, more compassionate places.
That's it. The power of choosing to act.